Today's question is simple. How do I mix vocals for different genres? I want to share 4 things with you to help make your vocal mixing sessions a lot less stressful, whether you're mixing the same genre you always mix or something entirely new. And by the way, I'm pretty sure you're not going to like number 4. Thing number 1, use the right effects. Different genres process vocals differently. I'm not talking about the core tone of the vocal. We'll get to that a little bit later. But I'm talking specifically about the effects that we put on top of the vocal, kind of like a seasoning. And the starting point, where everyone should start, is a dry vocal. For me, I can be pretty lazy. I like to do things as hands-off and minimal as I can. So if I can make the vocal work with no effects at all, I'm a happy camper. A lot of people tend to use effects like reverb, for example, as a crutch. They try to hide their vocal behind the reverb and other effects. Maybe they're embarrassed, they don't love the way their vocal sounds, so they put a bunch of stuff on it to hide it. Let you in on a little bit of a secret. We can all tell that you're doing that. And we can tell what your vocal sounds like whether you hide it behind reverb or not. So instead of trying to hide it, use the effects to enhance it and use stuff that's appropriate for whatever genre you're using. If you're doing a lot of pop music, you may find, unless it's a ballad, you're probably doing a very dry vocal. Go listen to a Billie Eilish record. The pop stuff, the up-tempo stuff, it's pretty much just her voice right here in your face. And that's it. And then we can go from there depending on the genre. Another example is rap. I don't mix a ton of rap, but when I do, I leave it dry. I'm not putting a bunch of effects on there because that's how everyone's expecting a rap to sound. If I throw reverb on a rap vocal, that's weird.
Can't take away from all the men and women who gave their lives on the battlefield where the battle's real, but America's a battle still. Built off the back of black brutals, bloodthirsty opportunists, build us to the highest consumer. Bundling trips on slave ships, body shackled to the docks. Fast forward to present day.
Let's talk about reverb. Reverb has made a huge comeback. It was huge in the 80s, kind of went away in the 90s, and then now it's back. Reverb is fantastic. I love reverb. But if you use too much reverb, you are labeling yourself as an amateur. Common rookie mistake is just gobs of reverb when it doesn't need it. You need the right amount. I typically use reverb on slower, more ballad-like songs. That tends to be appropriate. Here's the secret to reverb. EQ your reverb. Put an EQ after the reverb plugin and roll off everything below 200 hertz. Trust me, it's fantastic. Next, we got to talk about delay. In my mind, there are 2 flavors of delay: slapback delay and longer delay. Slapback delay is one of my favorite things on the planet. The formula is simple: 120 milliseconds of delay, no repeats, no feedback, roll off the high end and the low end. It's great for rock vocals, folk, something that needs to have a bit of an old school or kind of vintage sort of a vibe. Really anything that needs a little bit of vibe, I will at least try slapback on it. Distracted by what was. Longer delays, typically you hear on specific words and phrases, and they can work in big, heavy rock tunes as well as more chill, vibey ballad tunes.
This is Christ the King, whom shepherds guard and angels sing. Haste, haste to bring him light.
And the final thing I'll say for effects is doubling. Doubling isn't really an effect, although I've heard good things about that Waves ADT plugin. Typically, the sound of a rock vocal Think Foo Fighters. Typically, that's the sound of a doubled vocal, especially on the chorus. So the verse might be just one vocal, then the chorus, he sings it twice on two separate tracks and blends those together. That's a sound. I would call that's probably kind of an effect, but it's an effect that you have to do during the recording and production phase versus during the mix.
Break it down on the breakaway. Always the last to go. The takeaways, it's over, and I'm the last to know.
So that was the ultimate combination. That was a doubled, actually tripled vocal, lead up the middle, doubles left and right, and then a slapback delay across. All of them makes me happy. Okay, tip number 1 had to do with effects. Tip number 2 has to do with vocal tone, specifically the tone of the raw vocal itself, how we mix that vocal. Here's a controversial statement. 90% of mixing is the same, regardless of the genre. I don't mix songs very differently, whether it's a hip-hop song, a singer-songwriter tune, or a just straight-up rock band song. A good vocal tone is a good vocal tone. So the question is, what is a good vocal tone? For me, there are 3 criteria. It doesn't have excessive low end, it doesn't have excessive top end, and it doesn't have excessive mid-range. In other words, it's balanced, and a balanced vocal transcends genres. The number 1 mistake I hear after critiquing thousands of mixes over the last 15 years is vocals are too thick and warm. Thin it out. Don't take my word for it. Go listen to any professionally mixed music. You won't hear a thick, muddy vocal. You won't hear You'll hear a nice, clear, clean, crisp, and probably brighter than you thought it was vocal. Hey, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. We'll get back to it in just a moment. If you like what you see here, please be sure to like and subscribe. Also, if you're a home studio musician who's frustrated with the quality of your mixes, and you've got all this great music in you, but you can't seem to make your mixes sound like they do in your head, I can help. I've been a recording coach since 2009. After mixing hundreds of songs over the years, I developed a 5-step process that I use every time I mix. It's not a paint-by-numbers system. It's a mixing philosophy that ensures that you focus on the right things in the right order. One of the biggest mistakes people make in their mixes is focusing too much on the wrong things. Once you fix your focus, you fix your mixes. You can actually enjoy mixing again and be excited to share your music with your friends. If that sounds good to you, I'd love to give you a free copy of my 5-step mix guide. You can download it at 5stepmix.com. All right, back to the video. The third thing we want to talk about is vocal level. This is probably the thing that gets people hung up the most. They get a little bit lost as to what should the volume of this vocal be? It's especially difficult if you're a singer like me. When I'm recording my vocal and I put on headphones and I'm rocking out, typically I have the vocal very loud in my headphones. The vocal level is up here, the music level's down here. Why? So I can hear myself, so I can sing on pitch, theoretically. But when you mix a song, you don't want the vocal that loud. Problem is, I'm so used to that sound of my voice being louder than everything else that I tend to default to mixing the vocal too loud, at least at first. So let's talk about how do we pick that right vocal level. To me, there are kind of 2 approaches to vocal level. The first is having the vocal be a little bit buried. This is typical in rock music, heavier music. Typically, the vocal isn't way on top of the music. It's kind of buried within the music a little bit. You can still hear it, but it's almost like the vocal is just another member of the band. It's not significantly louder than the guitars or the drums or the snare, things like that. The other side of that coin is putting the vocal on top of the music. Now, this is more popular in things like pop, country, especially ballads, singer-songwriter stuff, typically where the lyric maybe has a little more importance and they want all the words to be heard. In those instances, the vocal really sits on top of the music a little bit more. Now, whichever approach you choose, pick the one that fits the genre that you're working in. But there's even within either of those, there's a pretty wide range of what's acceptable as far as a vocal level. This is something I learned amongst many things for the 7 years that I ran dueling mixes with Graham Cochran. He and I would both mix the same song every month. And I would listen to his mix and listen to my mix. And they would both be good, but they would be very different. There are lots of things that would be different, but one of those things would be the vocal level. One month, I might mix the vocal very loud compared to the music, and it worked. But then his mix might have the vocal more buried, but it also worked. That's something to keep in mind. There is a spot where you go too loud and the vocal is just like excessively loud and gross and no one likes it that loud. And you can go way too quiet where I literally can't make out the words that are being sung, or it's so quiet I find myself straining to hear the vocal. But aside from those two, there's quite a bit of free range there. And a lot of that comes up to your own personal taste. One thing you can do to test your vocal levels, turn your speakers down. Turn them down to nice and quiet where you could have a conversation over the music and see what the vocal's doing there. If you turn them down and all you hear is vocal, your vocal might be too loud. If you turn them down and the vocal gets lost, but you can still hear the music, it might be too quiet. All right, tip number 4. This is the one you're not going to like. A great vocal mix comes from a great vocal performance. See, told you you wouldn't like it. If you listen to the raw vocal and you don't get goosebumps, if you don't feel inspired, if you aren't wowed by the raw vocal, don't expect to be wowed by the mixed vocal. What you put in is what you get out. That doesn't mean you have to hire these high-level singers to sing everything you produce. Just be aware that if this isn't already pretty awesome, then this also probably won't be all that awesome. And if you really need this to be awesome, then this has to be awesome first. So in closing, I really do mix songs the same way no matter the genre. Whether it's got 100 tracks and a full band and all this stuff, whether it's orchestral with a horn section, whether it's rap and hip hop, whether it's singer-songwriter, whether it's some, ethnic tribal music, I'm going to mix it the same way because balanced music is balanced music. And if you can really internalize that, you can approach any song with confidence and excitement because you know what balanced sounds like, and you have confidence in your ability to get yourself there. All right, that's it for this video. If you liked this one, you'll probably like this video where I talk more about my favorite delay settings. Check it out now. Thanks for watching. See ya.